All right. Good morning. Welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad Podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. I'm your host, DL, America's most objective libertarian. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time so early. All right, let's get into it, folks. I apologize for yesterday. This is going to sound a little on the weird side, but I kind of got overwhelmed in a sense. You might say, what do you mean? Well, as you know, this weekend got lit up on social media over events in Minnesota. Alex Preddy, I think is his name. He was killed by ICE agents, and then just there was a lot going on. And so I was in the midst. What I normally try to do is, have conversations, collect a lot of, bookmark a lot of things, dive in, do some research. And so it ended up that I had no viable research for a show by the end of Sunday night. So I was like, okay, well, I could just do it in the morning. And I got up in the morning, and at first I was like, all right, I'm going to talk about Thomas Massie. And there was some commentary I saw about sedition, and I was like, all right, let's tackle that, because I thought, okay, Thomas Massie, probably this particular thing that I'm going to talk about I didn't think it would take a very long time. And so I was like, all right, maybe I need something else. And as I was trying to compile it together and trying to figure out, like, okay, what order should I put things in? I just got overwhelmed. And I don't mean in the sense like, oh no, I just can't do it. Overwhelmed. Woe is me. What I mean is it just like I ended up getting to like 7 o'clock and I wasn't even prepared. So when I say overwhelmed, I just mean like it was almost like you just took on too much and then you weren't ready. And I was like nowhere even near ready. And so I was like, man, I just can't do this. And then, my son was, being 6. So that made it even more challenging. So I was like, you know what? I was like, I made the foolish call. I said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do a show at noon. I don't know why I think to do that because the likelihood of me doing a show at noon is usually pretty low for a number of reasons. So anyway, here we are today. And you might have noticed you're like, okay, well, you just said something about sedition and that's not on your thumbnail, not in your description. That's because as I was reviewing all of this information, I realized, you know what? I think this is just its own episode all by its lonesome. So that's what we're going to do. Also, this week is a pretty heavy week, not just because it's ridiculously cold out. And for all my folks that are listening up north, north of Jacksonville, north of Florida, uh, I sympathize with you guys. So stay safe and stay warm up there. But this week is actually a pretty heavy week because last night I had to attend it's not an HOA, my civic association meeting. It's like they don't have near the power of an a homeowners association, but they, we pay a little money to be involved in the association. They maintain some of the community areas. There's always these conversations about what we're going to do, blah, blah, blah. So I had to kind of get myself prepared. And on top of that, my neighborhood, we used to have what's called a covenants and restrictions. I think this neighborhood was built in like 1978. And so I think from like 1978 until like 2012, they had covenant and restrictions, which basically meant it's like HOA light, and the developer, they're the ones that are in control of this. So they have the enforcement power. And then in 2012, they expired because there's a law in Florida that basically says, hey, you can't have this covenant and restriction forever because there are issues, you get far enough in the future and then there becomes issues on what exactly the rules are and stuff like that. So and we're not going to go into all the details, but so anyway, some of the neighbors have decided that apparently Florida has allowed, or they have some provision to revitalize the covenant and restrictions. So then we had that conversation, and that has taken up a great deal of my time because when I moved in 2016, there were no covenant and restrictions. And then now we're talking about them. And so all this time for like 10 years, I haven't had to even think about it. So then I was like, well, I have to go and read these things and see, what concerns that I have and so on and so forth. So, and I had to, parse that out. Like, what is this? Because it's all in legal language. And so I have to parse it out. What does it mean? So my time has been taken there. And then on top of that, tonight, I will be attending a men's group. This is kind of more of a personal thing. And so we're reading a book called Impossible Christianity. And I was like, I've been, kind of dedicating time to read this book and kind of have my thoughts prepared and whatnot. And then tomorrow night, no, I'm sorry, tomorrow afternoon, I, city council, they get on my nerves sometimes. Tomorrow afternoon, I will be attending at 2 o'clock. I'll be heading over to the city hall, and there, you might remember a while back I did a show on, and I just recently reposted it, but I did a show on landlord registry here in Jacksonville. And there is a council member, Jimmy Peluso. He advanced this piece of legislation to get this landlord registry, and I basically tore it apart, right, for one of my bill reviews. And then it never went anywhere. I think I can't remember if I don't remember if they just voted it down or if it didn't come up for a vote. I don't remember which one, but whatever the case, it basically went away. Well, he's back and he's got like a little town hall tomorrow at 2 o'clock. I saw through a local real estate group that people were like, "Hey, what's going on here?" And I was like, "Well, as it turns out, I did a bill review on his last bill. So here's a primer for you guys. And then tomorrow, I will be going to express my objections to it. So there's a lot going on here. And then, of course, you've got all the regular everyday things, work, family, trying to stay warm. I know people up north are like, dude, you got it easy. Yeah, maybe comparatively speaking, but compared to what I had like a few days ago is very difficult. So anyway, we've got a lot going on here, and those are all my excuses. So hopefully that flies with you guys. But if not, well, I think you're still watching, so we'll just go on. Anyway, so that's where we are. Um, uh, yes, yeah. Yeah, that Liberty lady's like, well, next time you text me that you're going to do a show at noon, I'm going to tell you no. Yeah, you should. You should be like, DL, stop lying. You are not going to do a show at noon. Don't even lie. Okay, so today, let's get into it. Today, we're going to talk about Thomas Massie. He's one of the very, very few politicians that when I talk about, I don't think I ever have anything bad to say. And if I disagree with him, it's just going to be an earnest and honest disagreement. That's it. Super simple. So, what do we got going on today? We're going to talk about three pieces of legislation. HR 7147, 7148, and House Resolution 1014. Now, what are these? Well, they are the Consolidated Appropriations Act for 2026 and the DHS spending bill. He took a lot of heat for that. So if you've been following on X or the news, you probably heard that he's catching flack again for being the only Republican to vote no on HR 7147, the DHS appropriations bill. Critics will say that it hurt border security or party unity, but there's more to this story. I want to show you some social media comments here. All right, where'd they go? Did I lose them already? Of course I did. There we go. Okay. All right. So I just found a random one. I thought this was pretty good. Now, this one's pretty long, and I broke it up into like multiple images here. We're not going to read it all. I'll just kind of skim over it. But he says, if you still support Thomas Massie after he voted against funding the wall, voted against funding ICE, against mass deportations, E-Verify, funding DHS and ICE again, right? That's what we're going to talk about today. Against defunding Planned Parenthood, cried about dead narco terrorists. And then he goes on and on and on. And so he gets to this point here. He said, it honestly says more about you than it does about him at this point. It means that you support open borders, mass migration, and the displacement of the American people. Wait, what? Displacement of the American? Where are you going? Do you even know what the word displacement means? It means you were like in one place and you have basically been forced to go somewhere else. Where are you going, sir? He said it means that you have absolutely atrocious political instincts and a complete lack of character judgment. Most importantly, it means that you care more about helping the radical left achieve their goal of destroying our great country than anything else, and you attempt to discreetly hide this ambition with the excuse of my principles. It means that you are functionally a leftist. Sad. Well, we're going to test that. Okay. And then somebody responded to him and they said, the latest bill, sold as the immigration bill supporting deportations, has funds to protect illegal immigrants with kids in some circumstances, funds abortion, funds transgender surgeries, adds 1.2 trillion to the debt. Go ahead, Blake. Defend this latest bill. Okay. It's a little bit inaccurate there, but we're going to dive into it. And that's cool. So Blake retweets him and says, Thomas Massie supporters are literally the most retarded group of people on the planet. They're functionally illiterate. I challenge any one of them to now I can't read it. I challenge any one of them to find me the lines in HR 7147 DHS ICE funding bill that contain any of this stuff. Hint, it's not in there. And guess what, folks? He's right. It's not in there. However, that's not the end of the story. Today, we're going to break down why Massie voted that way. It wasn't just about DHS funding. It was literally a strategic move tied to another bill with controversial earmarks, like funding for gender-affirming care. Now you went, DL, you just said it's not in there. And now you're saying it is. I said funding for gender-affirming care. When we're going to dive into what that means. So one more slide here real quick. Here's what Thomas Massie said. House rules are complicated and not well understood, even by many of my colleagues. Every Republican who voted for the DHS bill, which was everyone but me, enabled gender-affirming care earmarks and the automobile kill switch mandate to pass the House. Okay? So, we're going to dive into this, and we're going to make heads or tails of what all of this means. Okay? Because you've got 3 bills. You've got no specific direct language that says, here is some money for transgender surgeries or abortion or whatever else. You don't have any of that. And yet, at the same time, you have funding for all of those things. But how can that be? So let's talk about HR 7148 first. It's the big one, the Consolidated Appropriations Act for 2026. Here's what it does. It bundles funding for several departments, including defense, labor, health and human services, education, and transportation. In the labor, health, and human services part, there's an earmark. It's basically an allocation. And it's somewhat for gender-affirming care programs, sort of, which some conservatives oppose as wasteful or ideologically driven. Well, here's what happened. Ralph Norman proposed an amendment to strip that earmark from HR 7148. And Massie voted yes on this amendment, showing that he wanted it removed. But the amendment failed, so the earmarks, well, they stayed in the bill. So let me show you something up on the screen. This is what I was trying to get done here. I think I can put this up on the screen. Yeah, we'll do it this way. This is going to have to be. All right, so this is Ralph Norman's website, and we'll zoom in a little bit so you guys can see. All right, and maybe I can. Let's see. We'll try. We'll try to do a little. There we go. That looks a little bit better. There. I think I can. Let me adjust this just real quick. Just bear with me, folks. We're gonna adjust this just a wee bit. There. I think this will work. That way you guys can read it too. That way you know I'm not lying. All right. It says Congressman Ralph Norman introduced an amendment to strike Senate-inserted earmarks from the fiscal year 26 Labor, Health, and Human Services, Education, and Related Agencies Appropriations Bill, which funds federal programs related to workforce development, public health, and education. Unlike the Senate, the House does not include earmarks in the LHHS bill. However, the Senate is pushing to include billions of dollars in earmarks directing taxpayer funds to projects outside the core mission of LHHS. Congressman Norman's amendment would strike those provisions and restore accountability to the appropriations process. Scroll down here. He cites Heritage in Action, which says, in demanding earmarks of their own, Republicans have opened the door to Democrats to direct taxpayer funds to entities engaged in practices that most GOP taxpayer funds, jump the line there, that most GOP voters find abhorrent. You could, just for the record, folks, you could tell that I was never a good choice in high school when the teacher was like, who wants to read this chapter? I was always the terrible one. Anyway, voters elected Republican majorities in Congress to end this. That's right. Remember Doge? Congressman Norman's amendment would remove all earmarks from the Labor HHS bill, reducing the total cost to taxpayers by $1.3 billion. And then Club for Growth is quoted saying, earmarks are the currency of corruption. In recent years, the swamp has tried to rebrand earmarks as community funding projects, or congressionally directed spending. Now ask yourself, what is a community funding project? I have no idea unless you go and find out what those projects are. But just by the description, community funding projects, congressionally directed spending, that means nothing. But as American poet James Whitcomb Riley is credited as saying, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. The Consolidated Appropriation Act is littered with earmarks supporting outrageous spending prioritized by some senators. Read the amendment here. Okay, we're going to read the amendment in full, okay, because I want you guys to realize exactly what he had to say. All right, we're going to do the whole reading right now. Let me put it on the screen. There it is. Look at that. That's literally the whole amendment. And it says on page 3, line 1, after act, insert, quote, except community project funding / congressionally directed spending as specified in Division B, end quote. That's the amendment. A simple line that would have said, basically, nope, you can't have this $1.3 billion list of funding. Now, we still haven't really addressed the issue of, okay, where is it listed in the bill? It's right here. When you go through the bill, and you can hit the show notes, go look up the bill, go to Congress's website. It's listed as, that's not even a PDF. You can get a PDF or you can get an HTML. You can basically get a web page. And then look up community project funding. It's all throughout. Congressionally directed spending. It's all throughout. Yeah, they don't have to put in there, we're going to spend this money on abortion or transgender or gender affirming. That's not how it works. They play these games. It's like where they reword things, and then Americans are none the wiser. It's like, instead of saying, hey, go ask the stock boy, instead we say, let's go ask the shelf replenishing engineer. We make it sound more luxurious than it really is. You're still a stock boy. And that's not to degrade people that do stock shelving. It's a very admirable line of work, right? The shelves need stocked. If they're not stocked, when I go to buy something, I can't buy it because it's not there. So I'm not diminishing it. I'm just saying it is what it is. And you can dress it up in flowery language, but it is what it is. In the case of stock boy or stock person, that's a good thing. That's respectable. You don't need to add any flowery language. When it comes to spending, however, we do need that, because a lot of that spending, a lot meaning all of it, is not respectable. So that was the amendment. Now, I want to kind of address a couple of things here. Okay? Oh, before we do that, let's go back. Let's go back. Let's go to, where is it here? Let's go here because I wanted to read this. So this is from the Economic Policy Innovation Center. So Senate earmarks steer funds toward abortionist and pediatric gender transitions. Now, again, this stuff isn't specifically in the bill. Okay, so it's a little on the misleading side. And you can blame Congress for that. Because when somebody writes an article, like, I want you to just think about it for a second. Imagine if somebody says to you, Senate earmarks community project funding and directed spending as, and congressionally directed spending. That's not a headline that gets your attention. So they got to say abortionist and pediatric gender transitions and whatever else. That's what gets your attention. But we wouldn't have to do that if we could just read the damn bill and it had it in there in the first place. But instead, Congress is dressing it up as flowery language. So therefore, when people write articles about it, they got to be misleading. So let's dive into it real quick. All right. So we're going to go down here. So here are some, it says below are a few examples of earmarks in the Senate bills for groups working against core American values. Now, this is a conservative site, okay? Or I don't know if it's this is at least this page at least has a conservative bent. I don't know much about the Economic Policy Innovation Center, but this could just as easily be a left-leaning site when you have, writing about this. Uh, when the Democrats are in control, right? And the Democrats are supporting things that the left generally doesn't support, right? This could exactly be on the opposite foot, right? It just happens to be on the side of the right wing right now because that's who controls office. And so that's who the conservatives are going to be angry at when they support stuff. Okay. So Rady's rakes in taxpayer dollars for genders. I cannot read today for the life of me. For children's gender surgeries. Senator Alex Padilla, Democrat, California, included a $2 million earmark for pediatric mental health services at Rady's Children's Hospital in San Diego. Okay. And then they go on to say Rady's has a center dedicated to pediatric gender affirming care, including gender transition surgeries for minors. Okay. This is their claim. We're not going to address their claim. We're just going to talk. The claim of the 2 million is in fact in there. You can go and look up the nitty gritty details, and you can find all that in there. All right. Then it goes on. It comes down to another example here. It says big handouts for health clinic harming children. Senator Tina Smith, Democrat, has requested over $3 million for Henpin Healthcare. Henpin operates a pediatric gender and sexual health clinic that provides both mental and physical care to children, adolescents, and young adults. The clinic offers puberty blockers, hormone treatments, as well as referrals to surgeons and specialists for gender surgeries to children. Okay. And so then there's a $3 million. And then the last one, a helping hand for children's gender transition clinic. Senator Susan Collins, Republican, this one's kind of surprising, asked for nearly 1.6 million for the is it Northern or Norther? I'm going to go with Northern Light Eastern Maine Medical Center. Northern Light, yeah, they had a typo there. Northern Light operates a gender clinic specifically dedicated to, quote, children, adolescents, and young adults. They offer hormone therapy treatments to children for gender transitions, many which cannot be reversed. Okay, so again, this has a conservative bent. That's fine. What we really want to focus on is the fact that, hey, there were concessions made, there were appropriations made for particular spending for particular entities. Okay, that's what we need to know. Now, there are multiple things here at play. There is a concern about specific spending, gender affirming care, abortion. There's also a concern that Thomas Massie pointed out about a kill switch, which required automakers to install devices to prevent drunks from being able to turn on their car. And I believe that doesn't go into effect until like 2028 or something like that. Okay. But there's also this concern about spending in general, which Representative Norman sought to address and Massie supported. Okay. So I mentioned Doge a moment ago, right? Massie and Norman literally tried to Doge this damn bill. Okay. But let's go back to how this plays out. Okay. Let's talk. So now we've kind of got the gist of what's going on here. We've got some spending that has been allocated, and you can go through and you can see spending for this entity. This entity supports things that conservatives would not like. Okay. Right now, Republicans have control of Congress. They also have the White House. So therefore, it makes sense that people are going to raise attention to this. But what is that? How does this all play out with the bills? Because we've got 3 different bills here. Okay. This is the standalone Department of Homeland Security Appropriations Act for 2026. It's focusing on border security and DHS operations. It passed the House 220 to 207 with Massie as the sole GOP no and some Democrats voting yes to help push it through. These 2 bills, they might seem separate, but they're actually linked by a House rule. That's where this strategy comes in. Okay, that's where Thomas Massie's strategy comes in, because they tried to make an amendment. Hey, let's remove this crap. Let's stop spending taxpayer money. But that failed. So before voting on these bills, the House also passed House Resolution 1014, kind of narrowly, 214 to 213. And this is a rule that basically sets the terms for debate and voting. So it's not really legislation per se. It just says, okay, as you guys go forward to vote and discuss these two bills, here are the conditions under which you have to do it. That's it. Okay. The key part is Section 4, which says, quote, the clerk shall not transmit to the Senate a message that the House has passed H.R. 7148 until H.R. 7147 is passed by the House. In other words, the big bill with earmarks related to gender-affirming care and other things could not be sent to the Senate unless the other bill passed first. They linked them. It's a procedural lock. If H.R. 7147 fails, 7148 gets stuck in the House. No Senate action. No chance of becoming law in that form. Opponents of 7148, like Massie, could use 7147, and you can look in the show notes. I'm trying not to say all the names because it's a lot long names, as leverage. Voting no on 7147 was a way to potentially block the whole package. That's what's happening. Massie tried the direct route first, an amendment to remove the earmark. When that failed, he shifted to the procedural angle, voting no on one bill to stop another from advancing. If Massie's no had swayed the vote and 7147 had failed, then under HRes 1014, 7148 wouldn't have been sent to Senate. The earmarks and the rest of that bill would have been halted, at least temporarily, forcing renegotiation or a new approach. Now, how many times has Thomas Massie come out and said, I voted no because of spending? Like practically every time. Like practically, he talks about spending all the time. And taxpayers always gripe, well, why is all this spending? Why is this guy blah, 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 right? Remember years ago when Nancy Pelosi was all like, we got to pass the bill so we know what's in it. Thomas Massie is telling you what's in it. And some of you dummies out there keep getting mad at him for literally doing his job, what he's supposed to do. And I don't mean his job like, oh, his job is to go in there and vote no. I mean, his job is supposed to represent the people of his district and communicate what is going on. Hey, everybody, this is happening. This is what I did to try to stop it. People say, oh, Thomas Massie, what has he ever done? He does a lot, actually. He goes in there and he tries to fight for the American taxpayer. It's actually not the case that he goes in there and he only fights for his district. He's literally fighting for all of the taxpayers and saying, you shouldn't have to fund these things. That's what he does. And he comes up with clever ways to try to impede this stuff. And he keeps getting blocked. Why? Because he's literally one man. That's why. You got 535 people in Congress, 435 of them in the House. And people, dummies out there, will be like, what's he ever done? I don't know. What could you do against 434 people? Tell me. Tell me what. Half of you don't even understand what he's doing. And then you want to gripe and say, well, he doesn't do anything. No, he understands the rules and he tries to communicate what's going on. He tells you why he voted, why he opposes, or supports a bill. He'll tell you why. And it's not as simple as he votes his conscience, because that, for many people, that really doesn't mean anything because, like, what is his conscience, right? What he does is he votes according to the Constitution. And he tries to use the system to get Congress to behave according to the Constitution. And he's outnumbered. So he can pull all these, tricks and whatnot, But it doesn't do any good if he can't get backing from the American people who claim repeatedly this is what they want. How many times has the right said, drain the swamp? How excited were they when they heard about Doge? And then did they do anything when all the Doge efforts basically failed? No. And then what happens when somebody comes along and they're like, I got an idea. How about we vote against this spending? And then they go, oh, I can't believe it. And then they go a long list of things. And they're like, he didn't support all these things. You're right. He didn't support funding ICE. He didn't support funding DHS, because in order to do that, he would have been forced to fund other things, which he said he would not do, which you said you didn't want Congress to do. One of you is being honest. One of you is not. Now, let's go back to the criticism here. Where's my criticism here? Yeah, we're gonna go right here. Let's go back to that. That's the. All right. So, yeah, 7-9. So he says, Thomas Massie supporters are literally the most retarded group of people on the planet. Did I sound retarded? Because I understood what's going on in Congress. Do you, Blake, or anybody else that makes this claim? Because I'm pretty sure that none of you could have made this explanation. You don't know what's going on. Or you do know what's going on, and you're lying through your teeth when you say that you don't want certain things to be spent on. And he goes on to say they're functionally illiterate. I mean, I don't know. I read these bills. Not all of them. I read enough to do the show. Okay. If it's a smaller bill, as I've been very honest about, when it's a smaller bill, I do read the whole bill. When it's a larger bill, hundreds of pages, thousands of pages, then all of a sudden I'm like, I ain't reading all that. All right. But I challenge any one of them to find me the line in HR 7147 DHS ICE funding bill that contain any of this stuff. Hint, it's not there. You're right, Blake. It's not there because it's disguised as something else in a separate bill that was linked, that required the passage of this bill. That's why you can't find it, because your Congress is hiding it from you. And let me just tell you, Thomas Massie has come out repeatedly and said, one bill at a time for one thing, right? Rather than having this big old package of a bill, big, beautiful bill that has like 4,000 different things in there that it's doing. And then nobody reads the bill. And then it uses obscure language to hide things. Not obscure language, but it uses language to obscure what they're spending money on. And so then everybody's like, then people get to come along and they go, well, I challenge you to find me the line in there. Why, I did a Control F and I looked up gender, and the word gender isn't in there. You're right. It's not in there. This is kind of like follow the money, where you got to say, okay, Fred Jones over here got $1,000 from this entity. Doesn't sound so bad. This entity has a nice sounding name. And then you go and find out that this entity is linked to this other entity, which is linked to this, which is linked to this. And so then you got to go digging, right? That whole idea of like shell corporations, where you can't figure out who's behind the money and all that good stuff. It's kind of the same with Congress and their bills, especially the big ones. Right? The smaller ones, not so much. Smaller ones are generally pretty straightforward. The bills that are like 4 pages long, that's pretty straightforward. It doesn't take too much deciphering to try to figure them out. But the big ones, no, because you've got multiple things in them, and then you obscure what you're really trying to do with clever language, and then everybody just is none the wiser. And then everybody's like, I don't know why are you so angry? Why'd that Massie not fund this? Because all they hear is he didn't fund DHS. Why, how terrible of him. I voted for Trump so that he would deport, 30 million people, disregarding the fact that there was no way in hell that 30 million people were ever going to get deported, even if Trump was in office for like 4 terms. You do the math. The Trump administration claims $600,000 deportations for 2025. You go do the math on 30 million people. All right, I digress. Back to my point here. Even if the amendment says you cannot use funds for this purpose, like let's say let's say Ralph Norman's amendment had said, all right, you just can't use it for gender affirming care. that still doesn't stop things, because the entity still benefits because they can use funding for other services, which frees up the resources that they have that they're getting from somebody else. Think of it like this. This is a contrived and goofy example, but it's the one I could think of at like 6 in the morning. Let's say I go to the store and I have $50, and then my wife gives me an additional 50. And she says, "Hey, we're on a diet here, buddy. Don't you dare buy snacks with my $50. Okay. She might say, "You only buy meat and cheese and vegetables." Okay. I'm only going to buy meat, cheese, and vegetables with your $50. So then I come home with $20 worth of snacks. How did that happen? I mean, hopefully you understand already before I even explain it. I simply used my $50 to buy the snacks while using the $50 that she gave me to buy meat, cheese, and vegetables. That's why Representative Norman's amendment was so useful and why Massie supported it. Because it said, look, we're going to go get at the heart of what you guys are appropriating here. And let's go back. Let's go take a look at that. Right? Let's see, where did it go here? There. Let's take a look at it. Right? Community project funding. Do you know what that means? It could mean a lot of things. Some of those things maybe you agree with. Some of those things maybe you don't. Maybe, let's just take a couple of examples since we talked about abortion and gender-affirming care. Maybe you support gender-affirming care, but you oppose abortion. Okay? And you said, well, I oppose abortion. I don't think my tax dollars should go toward abortion. Well, guess what? When they say community funding, community project funding, congressionally directed spending, that doesn't guarantee that your money won't go to either one of those. Right? And if they specify it, like maybe your opponents who are the flip side, maybe they oppose gender-affirming care, but they support abortion, right? So they might get gender-affirming care specifically spelled out. Well, then abortion still gets paid for. So this was a way to just get it all and say, hey, no earmarks, none, zero. You know, you that's it. And the American people failed. I'm sorry, that's the way it is. The American people failed on that. Your congressman, if he's yours, but I like to think of Thomas Massie as my congressman because my actual congressman actually kind of sucks. All right, not kind of sucks a lot. He's terrible. But I wish that Thomas Massie were my congressman. But in a sense, he still is my congressman because what he did here, what Representative Norman did here, they attempted to stop the funding of certain things with my tax dollars. When it's federal, it's mine, right? My money is in that pot. So even though they're actually, I don't, where is Representative Norman out of? He is out of South Carolina. So even though Representative Norman is out of South Carolina and Thomas Massie's out of Kentucky, both of them were kind of like an ad hoc representative for me, saying, hey, DL and other people should not have to pay for these particular services. That's a good thing. And so when people, let me change the screen here. When people come at Thomas Massie, half the time they don't know what they're talking about because they didn't spend the time to understand what was going on. Most of the time, people don't even read the bills. In this particular case, it was a bit more tricky because you would have to understand the linkage and understand what 1014, House Resolution 1014 actually did to understand why it was that Thomas Massie voted the way that he did. Otherwise, if you just look at it straight up by the bills, you might say, what, he says that he supports deportations, which I believe he does, but he voted against it. Why would he vote against something that he says, like, and it might sound on the surface like he's being inconsistent? And that's because you don't understand the rules. And as Thomas Massie pointed out, many of his colleagues don't understand the rules. And so they get bamboozled. This is why we need people like Thomas Massie. This is why you should be watching this show on a regular basis, because I will do the work, dig in, figure things out, and then come and try to tell you in plain language what the heck is going on and why you should support people like Thomas Massie, why he's actually a net positive in Congress, despite the fact that he's unable to get things done because he is literally fighting against roughly 434 people. Perhaps not exactly 434 people. There are sometimes people that do take his side and support his causes, but many of them just vote the way, many of them just vote based on what the party tells them to do. Let's see, where are we at on time here? 8:24. Yeah, I think we're good. But I will tell you one last thing. I was thinking of if I wanted to show you a video, and I don't know. Do I want to try it? No, I'm not going to show it because I'll have to dig it up, and I don't think I could dig it up in time. But there is a video of Justin Amash, who used to be a House representative out of Michigan, and he was doing a town hall with his people in his district, and he was telling him, he said, "You get punished if you don't vote with your party enough." And I don't remember the exact numbers, but he said, like, I think it was in the low 90%. He voted with his party, at least in the committee or something like that. But it was a relatively decent amount. And his party said, "You don't vote enough along party lines, we're kicking you off this committee." That's what happened. That's what he told him. He got removed from the committee because he wouldn't vote enough. So ask yourself, what happens when you send somebody in that doesn't have the integrity and the wherewithal of somebody like Thomas Massie? They get in there and they say, they're going to do the most natural thing. They're going to say, well, if I get kicked off this committee, I have no voice. Better to have some voice than none, right? And so everybody ends up playing the game. That is the swamp. You will not drain the swamp if you don't even understand how it operates. So I encourage you guys to dig in, support Thomas Massie more than you don't, and at least, if nothing else, pay attention to what he says, because he communicates a lot with people, and a lot of people get it wrong. I saw a video the other day where somebody was rehashing where he voted to support Biden's continuing resolution bill. What people failed to remember, they remember that part, and they're like, oh, he supported this continuing resolution bill, but he wouldn't support Trump's. He's a terrible person. But what people forgot, and he explained it, he's on video, and it's like a 7-minute video or something like that. He's on video. The summary of it is, they wanted his vote. He wasn't going to give it. He negotiated that in the future, any continuing resolution that extended beyond April would require a 1% spending reduction. And he was like, this is a good negotiation. I will give you my vote for a future reduction of 1% when this goes beyond a certain time frame. And they made the deal. And then guess who violated that deal? Do you think it was the Democrats? You might think so, but it wasn't. It was Mike Johnson, who then said, well, let's reclassify this continuing resolution as something else. So therefore, we don't have to honor that commitment. That's the kind of games that are going on. That's why your swamp is not drained. And that is why damn near every single one of Massie's critics are dead wrong and should shut the hell up, because they don't know what they're talking about, because they don't even spend time to understand the game that's being played. They're just like, oh, we're going to go drain the swamp. We're just going to vote out this guy. And woohoo, swamp drained. Not how it works, folks. Not at all. All right. That's my show. Let's see. Let me get to some comments here. We can put some comments up on the screen. Okay? Just a few. And I have to put them up in full because I can't, the whole thing. So let's see here. DL about to bust out some legal stuff to shut the HOA crap down. Not necessarily. I think that this one's more of a try to convince your neighbors that it's just a bad idea and see what happens. Let's see. Does DL think the Libertarians are going to vote for the Republican nominee in 2028 based on how Trumpy is now treating people like Massie and Paul? Look, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine privately. Libertarians have really kind of thrown me for a loop, because after this issue with ICE up in Minnesota and Alex Preddy, man, There were some libertarians that surprised me in a positive way, and some libertarians that surprised me in a very negative way over that. That they really did. The ones that came out and were basically justifying his death, I was really surprised, especially how they were doing it. They were very callous, kind of like, oh yeah, kind of happens. I think one of them said, yeah, it sucks that he died. I'm like, it's somebody was killed by a federal agent, and the best you can come up with is, it sucks that he died. That's your response. It sucks that he died. You're a terrible person. And then other people who I thought would be a little bit more supportive because they were so tied to immigration, they've come out and they're like, whoa, this is not acceptable. The cost is already too great. And they surprised me because I thought they were going to be a little bit more tethered to immigration than they ended up being. So to answer your question, I'm not really sure how this is going to play out. I do believe that the Republicans are going to get their ass handed come the midterms. That's what I do believe is going to happen. Jerry says they should vote on each of those separately. Yes. In the ideal world, yes, we should vote on everything, every bill separately. There shouldn't be any linkages, right? And we should vote on individual things separately. So you shouldn't have one bill that does 2 or 3 different things. All should be separate. And then we know where people really are. Let's see here. Let's see. What else we got here? I would vote for the one that best represents my values or provides the outcome I am working toward, says Keith. I agree. Party loyalty is not something I do. I also agree. This is why I am so critical of the Libertarian Party. Also why I don't really have too many friends anymore in the Libertarian Party, because I pissed half of them off. It happens. Perhaps, though, in their defense, I could have been a little nicer. Whatever. You can see that I'm not shedding any tears over it. What else we got here? Yes. Marcus told me the lesser of 2 evils is still evil. He was right, I think. Trump, that Liberty lady says, Trump backing Make Israel Great Again. Ed Galrain is hilarious. Thank Pansy Peach already blocked me on X. That won't stop me from cyberbullying that clown. Okay. When you use all the emojis, you kind of confuse an old man, okay? I'm just saying. My son's not here to be like, Dad, this is what that means. Y'all gotta take it easy on me, okay? Aaron is my congressman, says Keith. And then let's see. DL figured it out. Comments on the screen. Yay! I know, right? Comments on the screen. We got to figure it out. So we got something. Something is better than nothing when it comes to podcasting. Not when it comes to your integrity and voting, in office. It's an entirely different situation. All right, folks, that's a wrap for this episode. I hope you found it informative and inspiring. I want you to do me a favor. Come back later, even if it's just for a moment. Drop a comment. Just give me some thoughts on the show later. Like I love it that you're in the comments now. Giving me some things to talk about. Whatever, all that good stuff. That's great. I love it. But make sure you come back later. Just drop a comment in there. Be like, that show was really great. Or, on second thought, it was terrible. Whatever the case may be. Maybe I missed something. Maybe I need to offer a correction. Or I'm just saying, if you want to be promiscuous with praise for all the hard work that I do, I am totally all ears. But with all of that being said, I'm out. I will see you tomorrow with another episode of Human Frequency. Christina and we're going to talk about Alex Preddy, and we're going to have kind of a heart-to-heart conversation on that issue. So I will see you tomorrow. But until then, stay safe, mind the weather, and guard your liberty. You know that I'm all about supporting organizations that hold my values. Make sure you head on over to blackgunsmatter.shop. They've got apparel, stickers, and more. Use the code LibertyDad, all one word, at checkout to score a 10% discount. Or just hit the referral link in the show notes. That'll make it so much easier. Remember, I'm not just a voice on a mic. I'm a dad who's working hard to deliver to you the best libertarian content. Connect with me on Linktree, where you'll find links to my Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee, because every bit helps keep this show rolling. Plus, you can find me on my other platforms to stay in the loop. With your help, this show, The Message of Liberty, will be seen and heard by more people. As always, I appreciate you tuning in and look forward to seeing you